It's up. You know what? You know what I didn't do though. You know,
You didn't put
I
chat
didn't
up.
put chat up.
I
I
mean,
never
of
put
course.
chat up.
You do. You put chat up
No,
yesterday.
but today, yeah. Well, you know what I'm saying. It is what
yeah,
it is.
I mean, whatever.
Sure. Hey, everybody. If you hear this music, you know what time it is.
Hey, everybody.
It is time for another, yes, another Not Your Average show coming to you live. We got a lot to discuss today.
Life.
But it's a big discussion topic thing going on.
Big bada boom.
Oh. Lilu Dallas, what's up? Fifth Element reference. Oh yeah.
A quote from the movie. She's perfect.
She is.
Just a quote from the movie. Quote, people. Just a quote. How's that Thursday going over there?
Pretty good. Because we're doing remote, I gotta count it down, as always, on a remote.
Yeah. Harris is incognito to me, as far as I know.
I'm gonna say 30 seconds, because I'm gonna go the whole 30.
That's a big number. I can count that out. Me pilot.
Yeah. 20 seconds. Oh, will the music come back in time? Let's see.
I actually don't know.
I don't know either. I don't
so.
know. Because now we only got 10 seconds. Gonna be close.
10.
Yep. 5.
Drop the beat.
4. No, no, it's not gonna make it in time because we are live. Welcome everybody, Not Your Average Show. What's
up,
Boy and Mike? It is it's June 24th, 2021, and good afternoon, Mr. Peckles. We got a lot, but a little to talk about. Basically, it's a lot and a little because, well, we'll get into it in a minute. But hey, dude, it's Thursday. What's going on with you?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, no, I guess no real news except just trying to get the house re-roofed, as some of you may know. And the HOA's disapproved the color of the shingles, so that's today's funness. I get to figure that out.
No shingles for you.
So
there's that.
It is what it is.
I don't have that problem. Our roof is probably gonna have to be replaced in the next 2 years, but I don't have a shingle problem or an HOA problem. Because we can basically put, my feeling is my house, my roof. I do whatever I want. So there's that. Ooh.
I also have that feeling, except people disagree with me.
Goodies to introduce.
And I think I've told you maybe before, maybe off show, but I actually am under 2 HOAs. Go figure that, guys. Yeah, our HOA area is in another HOA, right. So we have 2 HOAs we got to talk to because reasons.
That's kind of crazy. On the news of goodies and race sims, just so you guys know, I'm just gonna go to the full screen on this one. This new to my racing sim is just new to me, but it was a friend of mine sent it to me. It is the Formula One racing wheel by Fanatec, and it arrived just today. And it's got all the doodads, all the shifters for the direct drive wheel. It's got all the buttons, so I can go Formula One racing now and feel comfortable about my Formula One racing skills. And it's got the tethered cord, which is really good for a direct drive force feedback wheel like the sim experience. But I'm quite excited to take this puppy out and put some laps on it. So this is going to be a nice.
Looks pretty awesome, man.
Yeah,
honestly.
You're gonna have to come over and try it. It's a good addition to the to the sim, and it feels fantastic.
Skim?
Oh yeah.
Skim. So would you say that a wheel of that quality would be installed on the AMR Aston Martin?
It better
sim?
be, because this is actual carbon fiber. It's got the digital readout. It's got the shift gear indicators. I do have another panel that basically behind this will imitate a digital dash or basically what do they call anyhow. So it's a small display screen, and then it's got all the encoders. It's got the DRS, flash your headlights. It's got your twist grip knobs. It's got some joysticks.
We had the Pi computers in mine back in the day.
So it's definitely got the yes, it looks pretty. It's got the pedigree. And you'll hear it and it's really loud. It's sturdy, so that should be fun. So take that, Aston Martin. That's right.
Take that.
Actually, yeah, we'll see. What else do we got going on? So we do have a new player that's going to show up here in the eVTOL market, and that spawned us into a conversation that we started the other day, which we started to say, what is going to be the market and the demand for the eVTOL market? So we paid very little attention to this one, but again, I guess enough announcements piled up where it was like, oh, wow, we totally ignored these people. I have familiarity with flying the Embraer 145, so this is kind of a comfortable place for me. I'm happy to see that they're in the marketplace because I cherish that airplane. It's a lot of fun to fly. However, Embraer is in the eVTOL market, which is kind of exciting. And for whatever reason, it just kind of popped up that there's so much news that it's hard to avoid. But there's some conversation that Corey and I want to have because there's a lot of similarities in the way other people are attacking the eVTOL market, right? And like I said yesterday, if you're going to come in and expect a valuation of these billions of dollars, you have to prove value. And basically, in that Shark Tank moment, it was like, wait a second. We've gone into the challenges of building this market, but the difference is to actually get to a valuation is something completely different when we look at revenue, profit, and everything else, and what's going to go into that mixture. So we're going to talk about that at the bottom half of the show. But as an introductory, we're gonna discuss basically where Embraer has fallen in the entire mix of the VTOL/eVTOL market. So Corey and I stumbled onto this today, which is the Eve, and or basically this was first called, I guess, the EmbraerX is what it really is. But now
it spawned from it's an EmbraerX offshoot.
So this is basically what it is, and it's gorgeous. Okay, it's a very pretty aircraft. It is way prettier than I thought in aspects of what it's actually looking like, but it is again not much different from everything else that's out there in the marketplace right now. Okay, it's really not stunning to see this type of a design anymore because most every other designer is going the same style of propeller/pusher design with a forward cabin, very sleek, almost Bell 407 looking. They're calling it a winged VTOL aircraft. Its power plant is all electric. It's unknown range, unknown top speed, 10 total propellers, 1 pilot, 4 passengers, dimensions unknown, weight about a ton. Cruising altitude, anywhere from 2,600 to 3,300 feet. Not very high, so it's not going to get over any mountains on anytime soon. Two helicopter-like skids, which means this is going to be a pure vertical and landing takeoff design. There's not going to be very much running landings or landing gear type. And the cabin design is basically the same of what we've seen underslung high wing to give yourself the ability to have the rotors, pitched above and, unique. However, big player Embraer in the space of aircraft. Embraer, you may or may not know, is a massive player in aircraft. They've been in this marketplace for a long time, outside of anybody else, say like an Airbus or I don't know, some other manufacturers. There's very few other big name players that are out there pounding into this market right now. So with that said, if you take a look at the next stage of where our research kind of led us to was basically their website to see, hey, what is this Eve really all about and what applications do they see it fulfilling? And again, no surprises here. They're looking at the urban air traffic management and, some sort of development of their entire structure around it. Right. So really no big surprises there. So far, it's just about the same thing we've seen from every other manufacturer. Nothing too crazy. However, these guys do have a test platform that they've already put in place. Okay, they've had a full-scale test bed. They do have a flying prototype. They are a little bit further along down the road. I'd say they're probably in the same place that you would find basically a Joby or someone else that is at a critical phase of development for their product. Okay, and there's a bunch of links that we have below for this actual product, the Embraer Eve. However, what really struck the chord, which Corey's going to talk to you about really quickly here, is that they've got orders. Right, just like everybody else, they've got orders, and then there's another kick to what's going on in their particular marketplace. So, Corey, I'm going to give the floor to you so you can discuss some of that really quick.
Yeah, sure. So one thing, just as we kick off the next things about the orders was, Mike was talking about that the design seems similar, and it is similar. What makes maybe some things just to note is it does have pusher props, which is a little bit different. They seem fixed pusher props in the rear, so that's slightly different. One thing I'll make a note of is they claim it's 100% electric. I know we've been talking a lot about different types of UAVs or urban air mobility vehicles or that are intracity or intercity or both, right? And so I'm making a note that it's 100% electric because currently We know there's a lot being done in battery development to get better battery density, which extends range, right? And so I'm just kind of bringing up the part that it's fully electric because I'm looking at this thinking it's intra-city, like inside the city, the same city. I'm not seeing while we're looking here, we're talking about, you know, what's the range. I'm thinking
Not very
it's
far.
not going to be something you would go hundreds of miles in, like something that's more designed like the Liliums or other ones we've talked about before that, you know, specifically say it can go hundreds of, you know, a pretty far distance. So that's the thought anyway. So, but that's just my 2 cents. But yeah, getting on the thing that Mike was kind of spinning off to was we got this article coming to us saying that Halo, and that's Halo Aviation. Halo Aviation orders 200 eVTOLs from the Embraer spin-off Eve. And again, this is from June 6th, so a few weeks ago, not too old. And basically, they got their 200 of them on order, and that says that they secures the Halo order for 200 of them, and that's just the first one. As we're kind of going through these, we see that they have a few other ones as well. They got Halo, and then of course they have Blade Helicopter Aviation. If you're unfamiliar, well, okay, just finished up the last one too before, but Halo is a premium helicopter agency that operates in the U.S. and the U.K. as well. And they seem like they cater a bit to the higher end market, but it is what it is. But what you'll maybe note is when we talked about somebody like Blade, which we'll get to in a minute, but also Halo, they seem to do, again, shorter hops. So they could go a bit further, but again, I still think it fits kind of in well with what we're just commenting about the range, possible endurance of the EmbraerX. We're talking about. So. So there you go. But we'll see. I mean, this kind of I don't see exactly like when they think they'll field these. The last thing I saw in the Embraer, what they talked about with it, it talks like 2024. One thing to note, this is maybe, I don't know if Mike said this already, but one thing to note is EmbraerX Eve is partnered with Uber, right? So they've already got a big player in Uber to give them some not only some like market leverage in that market anyway, but maybe some expertise on what the like on-demand air travel might be looking for,
and which is a good complement to where this whole marketplace is going to go, right? I mean that's pretty much the biggest argument that we're going to have today.
So kind of pulling from this one is right, like upper echelon, shorter flights. I don't know about price, but maybe the people would pay a higher premium for a more let's call it a premium experience for instead of driving, right? The kind of clientele that would be going with like the Halo, and in some cases Blade, not always, but
we just basically had on screen. This is their flying prototype, okay, and they do have a sim structure and other parts of their design that are out there free for consumption on the internet. And we're going to take a look here at basically one of their videos that they've actually produced on their side. That basically it explains a little bit more about what their imagination is for this entire project, right? And what Corey said is absolutely 100% correct. They're going for a shorter range. They're going for a slightly different target, but we have to start examining what these millions and billions of dollars valuations are kind of doing to the marketplace with all the crowded players like Archer, like Joby. Jet-Up is in a little bit different place because they're a type of propulsion, not just an air taxi company. So they're in a different category there, right? So there's all different players coming from different directions, and as the steam builds up behind this marketplace, valuations are going crazy. But we also have to look at what the appetite's going to be for the general flying public, what their real impact is going to be, and what the real design is overall in the technologies that are out there. And this is one of their videos, and I mean, Corey and I can both chime into the fact that, look, the green ecosystem and this air mobility taxi design and the entire concept, we're all very, very excited about. That goes without question. It's going to see how they fare in application, right? And we're going to break down some of this here in a little bit, because also on top of this discussion, they've launched an agreement with Blade. Now, Blade is already a provider of these types of services, especially in New York City and other marketplaces where you can hire a helicopter, and they'll do pretty much door-to-door travel for you, almost, to the extent that they can. But as things are developing in this marketplace, you have to be critical of what's the next real step of how people are going to interact with it, right? Because without people, you don't have a market.
Of course, yeah.
So that's a really big part of the conversation. because all the fancy graphics in the world and all these design elements and you know, is it going to sell? Are you going to have if you're going to have somebody on board? Everybody wants the service, I would imagine. But what's going to be the price point that it's going to make it feasible for people to enjoy this service? Mm-hmm. Right?
And what might make them think they would not like the service? Like maybe they want the service, but they won't do it for X reason. Like, why is that? You know?
Agreed. And so we're going to digest a little bit more of that because, like I said, when we touched off the conversation, this is the other day, actually, yesterday, but this is probably one of the better looking videos that I've seen that actually shows the probability of what these markets might look like when they finally develop with the helipads and everything else that they're going to design in everyday living for the average customer. Because if the average customer can't utilize or get themselves on board these devices, it's going to be fairly pointless to have, right? So here's the other part of where Eve is also ready to deploy electric aircraft. And if, this one is pretty simple. They're going to deploy electric vertical aircraft for Blade in key southern Florida and West Coast markets. So they're already planning to position themselves. This is from June 24th via Yahoo Finance. They're already positioning themselves in a place to take advantage of what's already in existence. Now, here's the biggest thing. They're saying 2026, right? Look, you have to understand in this entire argument, Embraer has massive impact because they know how to deliver vehicles, right? Especially ones that fly. Can't say the same for Archer. Can't say the same for Joby. Can't say the same for some of these other companies. While they might have experienced professionals on their board or their staff that have the ability to make the inroads, okay? Embraer as a company, as a solid piece, has already got that ability to deliver. So that's one of the things that's also there. And they're talking about scalability and especially low noise levels in this article, which says that they plan to deploy together with local partners up to 60 of the aircraft for Blade's use throughout the United States beginning 2026. Okay? And Blade will even pay for the flight time to utilize Eve's aircraft, which is not unlike the model that you see for many airlines. So this is really, hey, this could be a good deal for some of these air carriers to get involved with, right? So that sets the stage for the next part. All in all, Corey, you look at this, I look at this. What's your take on the Eve in general? Like, I know we'll both be excited for the same things, but you've mentioned the inner city travel. We mentioned we don't know enough about the specifications, but where do you really see this fitting into a marketplace?
We've talked a bunch about different manufacturers, different designs, different intended applications as far as we can see. And I think I'll kind of stick with mine to say that I see this one kind of fitting in selected markets, like very targeted markets on purpose by Blade or whoever might operate them wherever they do. Let's say, in the US in this case. For example, I'm just thinking to myself, knowing about it, that it's Embraer. You and I know that Embraer's got some operations out of Melbourne Airport.
Correct.
And Melbourne Airport, if you're unaware, Melbourne, Florida Airport is on the east coast of Florida. Not quite in the center, but a little bit down on the east coast. So not quite South Florida. But again, we're not sure off this article either. It just says key southern Florida and West Coast markets. So key southern Florida, it could be doing testing out of Melbourne if they do operations there, and then move down to maybe Miami and whatnot. And just, again, local knowledge that we might know that maybe not everybody knows. We also know Sikorsky, which is we're not particularly talking about this, but Sikorsky helicopter manufacturing, they've got a test airport down that direction as well, further south. But some of the cool stuff that like the X2 and the Raider that's being worked on, that's actually being flown down there too, which is pretty cool. So it's a great place to test stuff. Not to mention it's generally a flat area, right?
Really
and we know when not to get too much into it, but the higher elevations you go to, the efficiency of propellers in this case, not so much engines, but propellers in this case, would decrease. So it kind of only makes sense they're targeting key southern Florida and West Coast markets for what you said. What did you say? 3,000 feet?
3,000 feet.
Ish, right. Something like that. So that really is telling me again, generally shorter hops.
Generally shorter.
And again, that's fine.
Yeah,
there's probably a market for that. We'll get to maybe some hurdles, but so that's kind of my thought on it.
No, I agree.
And then I know we're gonna get to like timelines here in a minute, but that's kind of my thought. Yeah, shorter hops.
Shorter hops.
and with Embraer behind it, and kind of the places they've already got their targets set, probably as we're just
Mhm.
guessing. I think it's got a decent shot, at least getting off the ground, as
I
we
say
say.
shorter hops and lower speeds. I say shorter hops, 80 knots, and basically this is a traffic avoidance vehicle, right? This is a vehicle that's basically going to
Hmm.
take place of not having to get on the highway, not having to really,
Hmm.
get bogged down in traffic, maybe between a downtown segment and say getting to LaGuardia Airport in say New York, or
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
getting to out of downtown Miami to an international airport or something of that nature, something where you would just
Hmm.
avoid traffic, right? It's not going to be a
Yeah.
high speed.
Yeah.
And again, this is where other manufacturers fit into different marketplaces. One of the things that strikes a chord for me that it comes back to Jet Terra is 200 knots, 200 miles an hour, and a full 1 hour range, which means that's a different type of transport. It's going to hit a totally different
Yeah.
segment, right?
Yeah.
You look at the
Yeah.
XTI 600, that thing's going for 1,000 miles vertical takeoff to landing in
Yep.
that
Yeah.
marketplace,
Yeah.
right? So all these places and all these areas have a different type of technology. And that leads me to the next part of the discussion that we're going to go on to here. And we have two documents that are in there before we get further into the discussion. One is, are air taxis ready for the prime time? And this is a data-driven
Hmm.
report from the state of air taxis in 2020. This is by Lufthansa Innovation Hub and Lufthansa Technik, or yeah, I guess they call it Technik, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
one is from Horizon Aircraft. This is another piece of research that's been done recently, which is Horizon Aircraft research report says safety is a key issue for the public with the future of air taxi success. And when you're going to introduce any new technology to the American flying or driving public, obviously, just like a few years ago, the American public wasn't really on board with self-driving cars. Now they're warming up to it a little bit more. What's that going to present as market challenges, right? So,
Hmm.
as a result of all that, we've actually gone out and we've kind of put together a little checklist. And we know we've done this before about what some of the challenges are in the future. Okay. We've
Yes.
talked,
Yes. We've actually. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Sorry.
have,
Go ahead.
right? No, go ahead. Add what you need to add.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we've referenced we've referenced this Lufthansa report a
Yeah,
while back,
for sure.
which but it's still from 2021, so it's not super old, and the market's still evolving. So these challenges have not been overcome just
Not
yet.
really.
So
Yeah.
we thought we'd bring it up again and maybe revisit it. And I know we got a few people in chat too. So as we kind of name some stuff like, let's say, safety or ease of
Hmm.
use or cost, feel free to chime in as we go, and we'll happily have a
Yeah.
conversation.
So here's the next part, right? The next step of this is actually introducing some talking points here. And this is the VTOL market as in general. And the first thing we're going to have to look at is how we're going to get to these massive valuations and how people are basically putting these big budget dollar, almost like blockbuster movie assessments onto things. And again, going back to the Shark Tank analogy, what I would look for if I was sitting there, Mark Cuban, before I invested in a vehicle that hasn't flown yet. And so, in order to really get this together, the VTOL market, the first thing is it's technology, right? And when we talk about technology, this is where we open up the discussion about whose technology and what technology do we see for the future that's got the best, and I'm talking about the best chance of making in the marketplace. First one that comes to mind, obviously, is Jetaptera because they are a totally different type of technology. Okay, they're going in a different direction, and they're proving through their anechoic chamber research and other things that they're capable of delivering on that. But after that, the other technologies that are in the marketplace aren't very different from each other. They're all very prop driven. And what do you think that means for the relationship of growth?
Well, prop driven versus
Any other
any
any
other
other
types
type?
of.
I mean, it puts you on the spot.
um, we've kind of said this before in a way, that if we looked at
Hmm.
airplanes, or let's look at helicopters in this
Sure.
case, right?
Right.
Application wise, we look at helicopters and we look at this is real. I'm going to kind of just water it down a bit, but if we look at the lift generating a surface area of a helicopter, the main rotor disc above, that's where the vertical component of the lift comes from. Well, the other types of lift too, but the vertical part will isolate in this case. And if you were to think about like maybe like some of these devices we've seen before, like let's say in this case the well, Jobby or
Yep.
anybody else really, they've divided out those lifting areas to smaller
Sure.
devices and placed them around for stability and other reasons, I'm sure. But they moved it around a bit. And so just on the surface of it, I'm thinking to myself, it's not necessarily like a new approach. It might be new technology, new applications, and new patents, right? With maybe the devices they're working with and stuff. But it's not necessarily like something new, and that doesn't mean that it's bad either. Don't think that I'm saying that it's doing the same thing that we know works won't work
Right.
again. I guess what I'm saying is it all fits a bit to the application, right? It's in the same way that if you wanted to go from a shorter hop, but then land somewhere that's like unprepared, like say a place that's not an airport, right? Thinking like EMS helicopters, but you can't fly an airplane to the middle of an intersection to pick somebody
Right.
up most of the time, right? So it all depends on application of it, and so if we're looking at again these aircraft that kind of like I said before, current technology with batteries are quite heavy. You want to fly 5
Mm-hmm.
people, and you just maybe not going to quite get the range, and that's where innovation comes into play. And we're happy to see a lot of players in the market, whether they're big players or small players, trying to innovate. But
And you're right.
I guess that's kind of my like real quick short take on there. That tech either will kind of do the same thing and then improve on what we've got, or they'll try to innovate and maybe do something new,
Yeah,
right?
and
So
I agree with you 100%
yeah.
because as I'm sitting here, I'm just clicking through the different websites of say Beta, okay, which is one we've talked about, Vertical, Archer, and Jobby, and what they all have in common is some sort of tilt design rotor aircraft
Mhm.
that has got some sort of either pusher, puller prop, vertical lift component that's generated mostly by propellers. We're not really into the Airbus, shrouded fan or maybe the new Bell Nexus
Or even
or
Lilium
even
for that
right,
example, like, they've got a whole bunch of tinier their ductile
correct.
fans, of course, a bit different, but yeah, still the same
Okay.
general
Yeah, and
idea.
then of course, like I said, there's a difference in when we take a look at something, say like Jet of Terra, because they're going for a different function. They're going with their fluidic propulsion system. So look, as a combination, this technology is really what's going to be the pusher of how people perceive and what's going to be their next thing of how they get into the marketplace, right? So after that, another thing that's key and I think is very critical that people are going to forget a lot is what relationships have these companies also developed along the line to keep in line with what they see their market vision is going to be for the future, right? That's a huge one, right? So beyond what they're just going to have as their technological design, they have to have decent relationships. And we've seen all sorts of different players come into the market. We've seen
Yeah,
some,
a whole
challenge
bunch.
themselves by going into, relationships with Garmin. Plenty have relationships with Honeywell. Others have,
Yep.
they have General Electric on board. Others have
Yep, I mean, there's Airbus in
Airbus,
there,
Rolls-Royce, right?
there's the avionics
Hmm.
manufacturers, Thales and Garmin's in, some of those, so it's all over the place, which is not surprising,
Right. So
But
a
yeah.
great comment by James is: do you guys think that whoever gets going their eVTOL first is going to take a big chunk of the market? I'm not so sure that that's an indication of success in this particular case. I don't know because
Mhm,
there's been plenty of firsts in aviation where things have flown first, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's been a success.
mhm.
A big factor in that statement is the A380. Everybody thought biggest, best, baddest is going to survive and have a massive impact. And it was basically, almost, I hate to say DOA, but it didn't make the impact that people had. 747's been around a lot longer and it succeeded still, right?
Mhm. Yeah, problems with the 777, the
Yeah, the
87. I mean,
787 had growing pains,
um,
right? Go ahead. What else were you going to say on that one?
no, I was just thinking. I mean, thinking again back to first to markets. I know we've talked actually about this before, hinted at it that um, being first to market in a niche where something's new doesn't always mean it's going to be the
No,
most
not at all.
successful. Like maybe they'll be first to
Right.
it, and it'll certainly get some traction. And but then somebody who's just a little bit behind that actually implements it better, or has, let's say in this case with like air taxis, maybe infrastructure already in place they can
True.
use. I'm thinking people, we talked a bit ago about how there's a company partnering with um another company that owns a bunch of parking garages in a
Hmm.
lot of urban areas. So maybe somebody that's to market first, but then has to build all their vertiports and does less operations, works for them and it's working. But then the next guy comes out that already owns all that infrastructure. They level the top floor and they put 4 more pads per place, and then their volume is just
And
And by then, another thing we'll get to, by then the FAA is already on board, that
yeah,
they know where all the aircraft are going to fly. They know how they're going to be managed, traffic separation. I mean, it's we'll get to all that because it's a big
It's a
topic.
big topic, and it's funny because as you were
Yeah.
saying that, one of the things that struck to mind is the movie Founder with Michael Keaton, because basically that's about McDonald's, but what he basically did was turn it on its ear and make it a real estate company, right? And there's a big, there's different ways to people can get into these marketplaces that makes a difference, right? So, but when we
Mhm.
talk even further beyond that, with the future, the further development, once you have those relationships, then what impact is that going to have on your physical design? Meaning, we've already talked about the actual, propulsion units and so on and so forth, but the physical design is, are you going to be fully electric? Are you going to be fully turbine based? Are you going to go with some sort of power plant that is attractive in other areas that may or may not have a noise footprint issue connected to it,
Yep, gonna be a
right?
hybrid. I mean,
There's a lot
yeah.
to that one. So these are just the steps before we've actually seen the market develop. So when these people are going through their valuation phases and what people are really looking for, the next two we've already kind of touched on, which are pretty massive, is the infrastructure and the regulators. And when I talk about infrastructure,
Yeah.
Corey just hit on it, that some people are making inroads with, these garages.
Yep.
But the other part of infrastructure is directly tied into the regulators, because the FAA has to carve out the airspace for these things to be able to fly competently in and out of
Mhm.
airports, in and out of class, class A airports, and massive, airspace, class B, and it can be class B airspace, not class
Yeah,
class
yeah,
A. I'm
not
sorry,
class A,
class
but
A is way
yeah.
up above 18,000, not class A airports. My bad. Class B airspace, and everything else in between. And then what
Yeah.
infrastructure is going to guide them? Are they going to be, I'm sure they're all going to be GPS, but are they going to have onboard systems like, FLIR, infrared, some other optic
Yeah,
system, and sensors on board? So what's your feelings on that one?
well, the I think the regulators are gonna have a field day with the second half of what I'll say. Because the first half is literally having them operate like helicopters with a pilot on
Right,
board with the new design of the aircraft
right.
itself. Um, and that's literally taking like a VTOL or VTOL, whether it's electric or hybrid or whatever it's powered by. But then then it flies into, let's say, this prepared vertiport in a downtown area and then departs. Let's say like a helicopter would do in the same general area. But then the second half, which you guys know if you've kept up with this topic long enough, is many of these manufacturers are intending the design to be
Which is
autonomous
totally different. Yeah.
sometime. Um, I just kind of put a caveat there, and I say, what about autonomous cars, which is still not working, not the way that many manufacturers want them to work. Obviously, first thing off in my head there is Tesla. Obviously, what they want, full self driving. It's not ready. It's not ready for that yet, And but one thing I hear people ask me sometimes, they'll say, okay, when you think full self driving cars will kind of be around, and I say, well, obviously the technology has to catch up to where it actually could functionally
Right,
do that.
right.
But then at some point, the DOT or whoever is going to end up approving that has to say, yeah, okay, you can actually do that, because it kind of runs over to other places, right? And this is
Big,
touched on a
big
bit in
places.
some of the articles that already happened. And I'm thinking like liability and things like that. If you get in a fully autonomous, whatever car it is, fully autonomous taxi service, let's call it, you don't own the car, but you get in the back, and then it gets in an accident.
Who's to blame?
Okay, who's at fault? I mean,
Well,
I don't know yet.
there's even a bigger one though.
But and that's just cars,
Sure.
right? So then you go back to aviation, in this case, urban air mobility vehicles, and then it's the same thing. It's well, there's two parts of that.
There's a big part.
There's like we said, the regulation, and then the regulators in the airspace, and then the next part, which I know I'll just kind of mention, but then we'll get to, is the willingness of people to actually use a service that is fully
Sure.
autonomous. And we'll
But you
get
got to
there,
remember something with the regulators, and what Corey's saying is that, look, the FAA, if you're going to have an aircraft that has an autopilot on board, it needs to have a backup for many of the systems that are on board that aircraft. That means it has to have backup altimeters, backup autopilot command systems, backup hydraulics, backup screens. It's not just as simple as flipping a switch and all of a sudden, this thing is okay to go fly anywhere under automation. No, even your biggest 747s, 787s, even down to the small Embraer 145s, they all have to meet very, very, very specific qualifications in order to have these automated pieces on board. And then those automated pieces have to have functional parts before takeoff and landing, okay, in order for them to be used operationally on board the aircraft. And on top of that, they have to be tuned to very specific tolerances to be able to fly certain guided flight paths at specific times in operations, right? So this is not an easy hoop to just jump through and say, "Oh, we're going to put a GPS on this thing. It's going to fly like your quadcopter and done and dusted." Because no,
Yeah.
there's a lot more that's going to go into that where people are going to have to prove that their technology is not only capable but viable and survivable. And what I mean by survivable, meaning when conditions aren't ideal, is it going to be able to come in and perform the job where the task is done successfully? So that's another big part. And the regulators and the infrastructure are kind of an intertwined mix in all of that. But what Corey alluded to also is that when we look at marketplace, what's going to be the willingness for people to actually participate in this? Because once you've got the design, once the thing is physically produced, how do you generate a need for somebody that says, like, for right now, today, I have no need for an air taxi. Okay? I don't. Okay. Until the day that I have to go travel again. Okay. Would I always like to escape traffic? Absolutely. But generally, my area doesn't have a lot of traffic. Right.
Yeah. Is it going to be cost effective?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, you know, you're at your house. You're not going to take an electric VTOL to the Publix because we wouldn't. That application doesn't fit. But if you were going to take an if you wanted to go somewhere that's, you know, a town 60 miles away across a major city, and you could take a VTOL over there, okay. But then you start thinking things, you know, well, I'm thinking how's the weather, but most people may not think about that. But, you know, how's the weather, but then safety, cost, availability, right? Is this something that goes like once an hour and then I got to wait? Like if I can drive over there in 45 minutes or wait 50 minutes and then get on the thing and it flies me over there, then am I going to do that? I mean, you know, so it's,
you know, it's also the complication of, do I have to sit on a TSA line for 40 minutes, you know, check in 2 hours early, you know, or am I going to basically be able to show up at the airport, they scan me, scan my bags, throw me on board this thing within 5 minutes and I'm airborne, right?
Yeah. What happens when you call a taxi at the curb and you want to say, take me down to 5th
it's
and
an
7th
instantaneous.
you just get in and you go. So
that's it.
I mean,
so you have to get over some of that need and desire where people are going to find that there's going to be an entry point of time versus relationship of money spent where they're going to find their marketplace. And I think Brad had a nice comment in there if you want to get to it in chat.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but here Brad says, is there really a substantial niche of higher end executives and others that will support and pay for what the eVTOL company charges? Well, so on my end, we don't know what they'll charge yet. Anyway, but on the flip side, there are certainly some that do that in different markets, right? And I think that the likes of like Blade with their idea and the UK operator, they're going after those people, right? But I think there's other things that others will try to expand this market to do other things for. And I'm thinking, like, let's say, for example, like if you were to fly into Central Florida, and plane tickets are cheaper into Melbourne, which is where Embraer is based, one of the places is based there. It's cheaper there, but you're there to take your family to Disney, which is a bit of a drive away. It's farther than you probably want to drive, but you could land there and then take your Uber Air eVTOL over to the Disney area, land, and boom, you're there. So, and then I guess I'm kind of going a bit farther, but that could be a package, right? Kind of like a cruise, if you know, like an excursion, it could be packages. But this is all in marketing. But I guess Brad's question really is, again, you know, the higher end executives and others of that kind of caliber, let's call them. And I mean, Mike, you did some flying in New York. What do you think?
Yeah, well,
about
I think you're exactly right. I think when this market develops, who's going to really take advantage of it? It's people where time is money. And that's what the real crisscross is going to be. Time is money. And if you don't have time as money as an option, and you don't have enough money to afford this ticket, and your time is not that valuable, you're obviously not that type of customer. That's it. It's pretty simple. However, I could see in the leisure aspects, okay? Let's say you're a tourist and you want to get from point A to point B in a manner that's going to both transport you and give you a localized view of a city, okay? Now we've entered a different marketplace because this is the type of device, an eVTOL taxi, low level altitude, which making that traverse across the city landscape for 10 minutes might be worth $150 for you because you'll get that view that you wouldn't have gotten from, say, taking a subway, and you would have gotten that same experience. So there are other places where there's going to be marketplaces that will actually come together that people might find utility in, because they will placate two different pieces of what a person wants in that market, right? So that's another aspect. And there's always going to be ingenious ways to look at it. Obviously, Grand Canyon helicopter tours would be amazing for this thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it'll still offer you this, the durability of a helicopter flight and so on and so forth. However, you're going to be in an eVTOL, and it might be a different experience for you. However, if we get back to this actual report here, right? One of the things inside this Lufthansa report is they talk about setting the stage, global media analysis, venture capital analysis, which we're at that stage right now, the academic research analysis, which is still ongoing, patent landscape analysis, which is what we're really alluding to as the technology goes to, and concluding what's next. And when we conclude what's next is where this market really gets, because ultimately the total back end of this, everything that actually happens, okay, in the entire conversation is based on what's the final revenue going to be after all money is expended, after all things are put in place, after we've found everything else, we've got our application, we've got willingness, we've got demand. We finally have to come to the conversation of revenue versus profit. Okay. And that's what I'm really stuck up about. Well, stuck in my conversation, like I said, in that Shark Tank kind of mind. Okay. What? Well, that's okay. Maybe that was a Freudian slip. I'm stuck up on it because look,
it's fine.
I hold this marketplace in great respect. I really do. Wouldn't put the time or the energy into thinking or talking about it if I didn't think that this market was going to go someplace. The flying car is going to be here. Someone, I believe, in the next 2 to 3 years is going to deliver what we would all competently look at, see on anywhere, and go, oh, that's a flying car. And that's going to be the association with the future. It's going to be the first. Mueller has been trying it for a long time. Okay, there's been companies out there that have thrown every piece of that they could have to get this done, but I think generationally, this is going to be transformative in the way we look at technology and transportation. What's your take? And what do you think the timeline is between seeing that car and now the other part is going to be revenue versus profit? Because anything can make money, but when is it going to finally become profitable? So how long are we really looking at this marketplace to develop?
That's a tough one to say. I mean, that might be a question, many investors have asked themselves, right? They got this money, they want to invest in a market that I also agree is probably gonna arrive. It'll depend on what it looks like when it gets here, and then who's going to be using it and where it's going to go first. One thing we've touched on other times, but maybe not today so much, is when new vehicles. I'm thinking new vehicles kind of like these that are smaller, and everybody's claiming they're more quiet and they're going to be harder to detect from people on the ground. I'm thinking of any other players that maybe aren't the general public looking to get into this. And so I mentioned earlier Sikorsky and the X2, and then I just kind of also mentioned the Raider, and that's a military helicopter in development. And so why I'm saying that is I think some of these innovations in technology might go military first and then be refined, however that looks like, and then maybe come back to the public, general public on the back end. And that being the case, they might come down in price because it might be a bit proven by then. So maybe what you're saying, a flying car, we might have flying cars, but they might not be like in your town, down your street, flying over your house. They might be somewhere else first, and then we see them here a bit later. But I mean, I think just everything we've talked about, all these shows about eVTOLs, VTOLs, air taxis in general, and then having now done a lot of research on tons of different manufacturers over the years, as Mike even mentioned, Mueller, been trying it for a long time. I think, we have the technology that's evolving now that it's I also agree. They're going to be here. They're going to be possible in the I'd say less than 5 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on all the issues you've already talked about, what it's going to look like when it gets here. But and I don't know, you've gone into the willingness of people to fly on them yet? Have you done that?
Well, so the difference is right now what I'm looking at is I'm bringing up different slides from this report, because what it basically comes down to is how many patents have been filed, how many other companies are in there right now, and what it is that people are really looking at for the future of these particular aircraft. Now, the part that goes into this Horizon aircraft and their willingness, okay? So basically, this is basically saying that less than 47% would be worried about the cost of a flight, while 38% say comfort during flights would be a concern, and 43% are worried about the environmental impact. Okay, and in that, so this also study said that 10 countries across North America, Africa, 65% of adults said that they would fly in eVTOLs once they are approved by regulators, right? While 61 said they would use them in other countries where regulators have approved them. Okay, people in the UAE, 87%, India, 82% are most likely to try air taxis once they're approved, right? But it's the other part in this willingness is that they're worried about the cost, they're worried about the comfort, and they're worried about the environment. That's almost half of that marketplace. 77% of the people questioned believe the development phase in the sector was positive, and that's a good thing. So, well, that continues, and it seems like this has been a major shift because it wasn't this way just 6 years ago in this marketplace. Okay. It seems like that it's shifting. Now, the question that I want to know is, did they say that these things were going to be manned or unmanned? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, that was my other question about this the report, and we realized, we found this article about the report, and I'm still trying to find the report. But I admit I have not.
But
seen
it says
yet,
this. It
so
says, however,
that.
safety issues need to be rigorously addressed, with 3 out of 4, 76% of those surveyed saying worries about eVTOL safety would be the biggest deterrent for using air taxis, while 69% would want reassurances about the training of the pilots.
Well, I know when I was talking to you a second ago, I saw the thing about the pilots, but it doesn't imply.
That was on the,
I don't know what the question implies, that they're manned or they're not manned. And maybe that was a write-in. People like, what do you want to see more? Well, training on the pilots. Pilots got to know how to fly them. Well, of course.
Obviously.
So, but yeah, it's that is something that would obviously have to happen if they're manned. Somebody's got to know what they're doing.
One would hope.
But I guess the pull away from there for me is 76% of those surveyed says safety legit is
number
their
one
biggest concern, which is rightfully
which
so,
means,
of course.
Which means the thing is, when these things debut, any bad news in that sector, any accidents, incidents, or unfortunate fatalities, which do happen in aviation, would probably be a massive setback. So it would be
for the whole industry
completely.
Because I know. Because Pex was saying that earlier, who's first to market? And one of the things I was thinking but didn't mention back then when he asked that question was, if you're first to market and everything goes great, everything goes great. But if you're first to market, because somebody's first, and then something happens, you've not only hurt yourself, but since this is an emerging market, now you've hurt everybody, literally, because it's, again, let's just imagine, whenever it happens, you see the news, first air taxis out of New York, flying around, everything's great, boom, next week, something happened, horrible, it's not good, they crashed, and now everybody's like, and then like, oh, they're building one of those down by my street, man, I don't know about that, so it's
I don't know if I want that flying over.
It's that new market,
NIMBY, not in my backyard mentality starts to form. Look, the other part of it is that what it seems like we've gone beyond one other part. Everyone was under the, I guess, the impression that the first thing that we were going to see was Amazon deliveries by air, pizza deliveries by air, so on and so forth. And it's amazing to me how in such a short leap we went from, hey, that's not even like something that's on the radar right now. People are gotten more excited about air taxi, right? And it's been like, it was almost like a flash in the pan kind of overnight change in the temperament. So, look, I guess here's the biggest thing. Are we 3, 5, 7, 10 years to a real market development and to real profitability for some of these companies? Where do we see the money going? How do we see it actually flowing? And what's the actual final revenue going to be? Is such an unknown, but I'm going to throw it out there that I say we don't see real full market features in this area. I'm talking about fully implemented, go up, slap down a credit card, get on the device, take me where I want to go, at the very least, at the earliest, 4 years. And I don't see, after that, I don't see any one of these companies making profit. And I'm talking about true profit for at least 10. It's going to be a long time before they see like the turn where all that money invested, because putting things up in the air is expensive. It's not cheap. It's not cheap at all. So you can just see here right now, global revenue ride sharing services was what is it? $218 billion. Okay. And drone technology investment right now is only at 4.5 billion. Okay. Which is key drivers in this thing. So there's going to be a ton of money when this marketplace emerges, but I just don't think you're getting in at the cheapest investment prices that people think. You're going to have to willing to spend a little bit to make a little bit in this marketplace.
Early adopter syndrome.
I love how you just took everything that I said and said early adopter syndrome, completely just plowed under my argument. And that's it. You're just, that's it. Early adapters. That's great.
Yeah, no, and when you asked me earlier when I think, I kind of was saying the same thing, 5 years to see something that's actually like in place somewhere, approved by the regulators. You can go there and get on a flight, whether it's, on demand or you show up and, you buy a ticket earlier, however it works. I think, 5 years, for sure to see that happen. Could certainly be earlier, because there's so much going on here, and it's only ramping up in investment and everybody's interest. But I think there could be some giant hurdles, whether it's regulatory or not. I guess, one thing people could maybe argue, looking at quads, like drones, that you just fly in your backyard. They are obviously much smaller, but there's nobody on board, and you just go out and buy them wherever you buy. You can buy them online, they're shipped to your house, done.
Yep.
Right? These VTOLs are obviously people on board. They're huge. They're obviously much bigger. It's just different. And then, of course, you can already see all the regulators trying to scramble to figure out drone airspace. And if you have a drone, hopefully you know all the rules and trying to keep yourself legal and where you can fly and where you shouldn't fly.
Not so sure about that,
but that's an evolving space too. And so we'll just have to see.
So Brad had one more comment. He said, "Imagine 18-year-old male." I don't know if that's I don't know. Asking his parents if they could afford to pay for his flying licenses for a VTOL. Now, let's put it this way. It's not going to be the same, okay? Obviously, a VTOL is not going to be the same price as getting into a Cessna and making your way up that scale. And especially the same way that the pricing between a Cessna and, say, getting into helicopters like an R-22, a Cessna you could probably find flying around right now for about $100 an hour. There ain't no way you're getting a vertical takeoff and landing device for anywhere under $350 an hour with an instructor wet. So that just goes without saying that I would say that the price for these would probably fall somewhere in between the middle. I would say probably the $200 range, because your maintenance is going to be a little bit less. You're not going to have as many moving parts, but you're still going to have the device, and it still ain't going to be cheap. So that's the other thing. And
I guess what Brad's hinting on there, for me, I take that one step further and say, how long will it be until you can own your own VTOL?
That is different.
From an airport, right? You got a hangar, and you got a hangar, and you got a VTOL, and what?
If this makes it into people's homes, look, I don't think that's going to be.
No, I'm not saying.
Like, I get it.
Because
I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, different.
James also had another comment. There, a lot of cities are cracking down on drones, telling people where they can and can't fly them.
Yeah.
But that's been because people didn't pay attention to the rules early on. And look, there's a prime example. Here's a prime example. Drones are an excellent device. In the right hands, as a flying camera, they are devastatingly, surgically, absolutely amazing devices. You can do great things with them. And they can survey roofs, power lines, all different types of work. Unfortunately, chuckleheads went out there and flew them recreationally in areas that didn't need to be. And they've given drones a bad name. And then suddenly here comes the regulators and saying, look, we can't have this, and that's the scenario that you're up against. And not that I'm saying that Lilium's going to go ahead and fly donuts over downtown New York City and cause in
the approach path of 747.
No, they're not going to,
because they can.
They're not going to do that. However, it's going to take some real creative and smart people to make sure that these things happen on time, deliver with revenue, and they're safe. And that's going to be the introduction to the marketplace. It's necessary to make these VTOL, eVTOL marketplaces a success. Just our 2 cents, right?
I guess I'm thinking you'd see commercial applications before private. That's kind of where I'm going first.
And if it was going to be
due to regulation, almost
correct.
Totally,
and I'm myself, and I'm sure you would be the first ones to throw our hat into that rings to go if they're going to be manned operations that I would like to fly it. There's no question about that. We haven't kept that a secret, but it would be great to see. So we just wanted to bring to you guys our take on one of the things that popped up out of a conversation that we had yesterday, which was basically how are these things going to make it to marketplace? What's going to be their true breakthrough point? When are they going to generate revenue? But most importantly, how is this market really going to develop? Because there are challenges. However, what's coming up more and more is that there's a lot of people evaluating these companies at great massive values, and they might be doing them a tremendous disservice because there's other players in the marketplace that could be equally servicing this entire industry at much cheaper and better dollar values. So there's values to be had in that eVTOL and air taxi market right now, I think, for me personally.
Oh yeah. So, and I'll put it out to everybody in chat or watching this video later. What do you foresee you would use a urban air mobility air taxi for, like distance wise, time wise, and then what would you pay for that?
Sure.
Right? Because I'm thinking when you go online and you want to fly to an airport that's not too far away, you know, these short hops on some of these puddle jumper airplanes, you can get a cheap ticket. I mean, pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So it's gonna either have to offer something that the puddle jumpers can't,
or that helicopters can't,
like landing in downtown, you know, at a vertiport that's just not near an airport for whatever reason, or be cheaper. Or, you know, what is it gonna be that someone like you guys in chat would make you choose an air taxi, considering it's safe and everything else, over a puddle jumper that might be the same price for the same distance.
And the same goes for that. You know, we've looked at Hill helicopters before as well. And, you know, there's going to be other possible cheap entrants from the helicopter development side that could come up as well that might challenge this marketplace. But that, you know, that remains to be seen. What would be the maybe? And hey, how about guys also leave a comment below about when do you think this market will actually be here? When do you think they're going to be flying? When do you think that the market's actually going to arrive, and what do you expect from it? So that'd be great to hear from you guys.
Yeah, that'd be super interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Unfortunately, that is all we have time for this Thursday. We were going to try to cover a rocket launch tomorrow, which has been rescheduled, which is great because I'm going to go off and visit family, spend some time with fam. And with that said, I'm done. Are you done?
I'm done. Yeah. Thanks for everybody so much for hanging out. I would finish up just a few comments before we head out. But James says, I've got a ticket for Denver to Minneapolis on the 4th. Less than 100. That's kind of where I'm going with that question was with rates and the way the regionals and the way they've got all their tickets laid out with, you know, connecting flights and all that. It's what is it going to take for you to consider at least to use an air taxi for comparable distances?
Understood.
So,
I just got something in mind. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. We will we'll continue this discussion as always on the channel. We'll be available for the air taxi market VTOL stuff. And we thank you for your time today. And we will catch you guys real soon. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, we still got to change this music again. It's kind of a long drawn out outro.
It's good, but it doesn't roll in there.
Got to make a whole new screen. More work.
Denver to Minneapolis. What's that distance?
That's pretty far. Oh, I gotta look it up.
I know, but that's what I'm getting at. Like, what is
it? In ForeFlight. Oh. No, it's got to be like maybe 17 to 1,800 miles, maybe more than that. Hold up. Wait a minute. Show 54 has come to a close. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We greatly appreciate your time.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, it's too far. Yep.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.